In 1945, a jar buried in the Egyptian sand revealed the secret book of John. It was labelled the most dangerous heresy of the ancient world. Genuinely. And the church spent literally centuries trying to erase it from history. It doesn't just contradict the Bible, it actually claims the creator of this world is a deluded, arrogant fool. I'm walking through the first half of this forbidden text to figure out exactly what made it so contentious. Let's see why they were terrified. And it all starts with a grieving disciple, a confrontational Pharisee, and a vision that would rewrite the architecture of reality itself. Okay, I'm going to take you through this chapter by chapter, and if at some point you're thinking, what the hell is going on here? Just remember, the authors of the past loved to drag things out. Deep prose, poetry, flashy flair. But stick with me, it gets juicy. So the story starts fairly tame. We get reintroduced to disciples James and John, sons of Zebedee, which confused me because I thought that was actually a 1980s TV character, but apparently it's a Catholic saint. Anyway, a Pharisee, a persecutor of Christians, asks John, "Where is your teacher?" This is post-crucifixion. It's a jab. Jesus is dead. John, being the dramatic guy that he is, answers, he has gone back to the place from which he came, which had me a little hysterical on first reading. The Pharisee could just as easily be thinking, oh, okay, Jesus has just gone back to the market or Nazareth, instead of, back to heaven. The Pharisee sends a few insults John's way regarding Jesus and Christianity, standard Pharisee behaviour, and then the text takes a strange turn. After barely 3 sentences into the book, which were used to establish John the disciple in the third person, the author suddenly drops an absolute bombshell and starts to refer to himself as being John in the first person, as if to say, surprise! I'm not entirely sure what happened here, to be honest. Let's just put it down to John killing off his ghostwriter in a fit of rage. So, after establishing that the author is John, he states for the record that he was very unhappy after the events that took place in the temple. I suppose an insult match with a Pharisee will do that. Now we've gotten John's strange reveal out of the way, he then goes on to ask some really powerful existential questions. Who is God? What is heaven? What is the imperishable realm? That word, imperishable, is a crucial hint this text is about to swerve 90 degrees away from tradition. It's outside the Bible's conception of heaven and God. The phrasing itself almost offers a reward. It sounds greedy. John reflects that Jesus' teachings never really touched on the intangible world, and then, conveniently, and the word conveniently is doing biblical proportions of work here, the heavens open. The whole of creation shines with light from above. The world quakes. The author also keeps telling you to behold, just in case you weren't aware that the heavens opening was a big deal. Then a child appears, then an old man, then back to a young man. The figure tells John not to be afraid, because the text implies it's obviously Jesus. Who else would be dropping in from the sky? And Jesus tells John he's here to teach him about the invisible world, the very subject John was just pondering on. So, to break that down, Jesus is here to teach John about everything. Following that, we get another post-Bible phrase. Jesus says there are humans who are immovable and who can receive more knowledge. We learn that the immovable are humans who are spiritually awakened. This is one of those moments where John gets to give himself a pat on the back for presumably being one of the first. I do recognise my critique thus far comes across as quite facetious, but alongside explaining the text, I'm also trying to make sense of it. Jesus then launches into a superlative speech about the majestic nature of God, using phrases such as "the one has no boundaries," nothing exists outside of it. This goes on for some time, almost 400 words to be exact. Jesus is absolutely a devoted son through and through. The chapter ends with God existing as this great being, but doesn't actually seem to have much agency. We're led to believe he is nothing like the Christian God we're familiar with. This is a pre-God, which addresses the text's first major heresy, and it's a small one with how the text is about to unfold. So the Book of John comes out swinging. Christianity has it wrong. Stay tuned to hear what he's actually like. It almost comes across like an ancient TikTok. Anyway, the text moves forward. It informs us that the pure spring of the water of life surrounds God and sustains everything. So the Gnostic God is different, but we're still led to believe he's just as pure. And a quick sidebar for the term Gnostic here. Gnostic means elevated knowledge, and it also embodies a set of texts which the Book of John comes under. Back to the Book of John. Following God's statement of neutrality comes an awakening. God sees his own reflection, his image, in the spring which he embodies. And in that moment, the Book of John says, his self-aware thought came into being. God contemplated himself and created an additional form. The strangeness doesn't stop there. The text personifies God's new self-reflected form as she. She stood before him, ready to serve the spring itself. Her lifeguard uniform was ready and waiting. I'm sorry, this is a poor joke. She is described as the first of the powers, prior to everything. The text essentially spoils its own ending. God will end up with several powers. I presume the end credit scene has God with all of the Infinity Stones, or maybe it will just have an image of me being shot on a comedy stage. She, the new form, gets a name. Barbelo. Some Semitic translations suggest that this means daughter of God. And with Barbelo's introduction, we have stumbled into the beginning of a very weird Gnostic pantheon. I wish I could say the weirdness gets less weird from here. It only gets worse. The text calls Barbelo the universal womb. She gets promoted pretty quickly. The Barbelo asks the Virgin Spirit for foreknowledge, and we have to pause here because this is where the heresy really kicks in. The Virgin Spirit is God in his base state, an extension of the pure spring metaphor. The purest form of God is self-contained, unblemished by thoughts. There's an undertone of Christian morality here. Thoughts are inherently sinful. A being without thought is infinitely more worthy than one who has them. But the real fracture is foreknowledge, the ability to see all future outcomes. This is an absolute shattering of Christian doctrine. To paraphrase the Old Testament, Adam and Eve were struck with mortality because they ate from the knowledge tree. For Barbelo to ask for the same thing and have her wish granted truly spits in the face of what the Old Testament stands for. I recognise the author is trying to say God has several forms, therefore it's God asking himself, not a mere creation. Nevertheless, the parallel is too recognisable. You can see why the church took great offence. Barbelo then asks for incorruptibility, granted. Then, curiously, incorruptibility goes to stand by thought and foreknowledge. Barbelo isn't just rattling off her Christmas list, she's creating more forms. They're becoming tangible. Everlasting life joins the party. Then truth. The text calls these the 5 realms. Barbelo, which is thought, foreknowledge, incorruptibility, life everlasting, and truth. It's interesting to me that the author feels the need to demonstrate these traits were asked for, when Barbelo is supposed to be part of God. Surely something within God would house those traits innately anyway. Nevertheless, we have our Avengers level lineup, the 5 forms. So to summarise where we're at, John went to a Jewish temple to mourn Jesus, got insulted by a Pharisee, left, the heavens opened, Jesus appeared and gave John a crash course on the invisible world, which we're still getting. We learned God existed before thought, and then thought himself into existence. That self-reflection became Barbelo, the second form. She asked for foreknowledge, incorruptibility, life everlasting, and truth, creating the 5 realms. No consequences, no mortality curse, just wish granted. Then, in what can only be described as a what the hell is going on moment, God and Barbelo conceive Jesus. I'm curious to see if God will keep his virgin spirit following this. But anyway, Jesus, much like his mum Barbelo, asks for things as well. Mind, word, will, and much like the 5 realms, they also came to be. You'll notice a small pattern here. Jesus and Barbelo had to ask for things when they were created, because they were created lacklustily. Or at least, that's what the text is trying to convey. Put a point on that heresy counter. Jesus is given the highest name of all, Christ. Then, whether by himself or with spiritual aid, he brings forth more powers. 4 of them. The 4 lights. The fundamental powers. We're told they're angels. The 4 angels are Harmozl, Oriel, Davitai, who we shall call Dave because I'm not saying that more than once, and Eleleth, who we shall call 11. Is it too late to make a Stranger Things reference? Anyway, those are the 4 angels. Jesus has created quite a posse. In tandem with the creation of the angels, the first human is also born, or at least the first archetype of what a human can be. 4 humans are created to mirror the 4 angels. The realm of Harmozl holds the uncorrupted idea of humanity, Oriel represents consciousness, Dave represents enlightened human souls, 11 represents souls which need to repent. Jesus Christ, you don't realise how dense this backstory is until you're reading it back to yourself. It's also kind of crazy to think John is mourning his teacher. He's been insulted, he's down bad, and Jesus shows up and says, "Stop that, John. You need to learn about the architecture of reality." I can't fathom why the author thought this was the right moment. Jesus spent 3.5 years barely mentioning his lineage, and suddenly it's far more complex than the simplistic platitudes in the Gospels. I'm not saying I doubt the Gospel of John, even though my name is Pagan Logic. It just strikes me as lazy writing. Jesus is giving John a history lesson as a pick-me-up. Now, before we go further, if you're enjoying watching me wrestle with a 2,000-year-old heretical text, drop a comment with your heresy counter. I genuinely want to know what number everyone landed on. That was a necessary detour because we're about to get into one of the crazier turns the Book of John has to offer. We need to look back at our 4 angels, specifically 11. 11 has a specific being within her, Sophia, the being of wisdom. Yes, I know, the Book of John is starting to feel like Inception. Sophia, in the same manner as Barbelo, began to think for herself. She wanted to create something. This seems to be the nature of beings in this world. They come to be, and then they make things that come to be. But Sophia was a lesser being. Creating was frowned upon. If she wanted to make something, she would have to do it alone, without the help of God or anyone else. This is where things go really wrong. This is the Book of John's Garden of Eden event. Because she made something without God's help, it was imperfect to say the least. The text says she gave rise to a misshapen being, which, fairly dramatically, takes the form of a dragon with a lion's head. It sounds a little top-heavy, but the intent is clear. The being is powerful, but conceptually twisted. Then we have this strange divorce. Sophia pushes her son away, tries to hide him. In turn, her son steals some of Sophia's powers and moves far away so he can create his own realms, as if we didn't have enough realms in the Book of John. The creature's name was Yaldabaoth. You can compare him to Darth Vader, Sauron, Lord Voldemort. Yaldabaoth is essentially Satan in this story, with a slight twist. He creates his own version of heaven, his own version of hell, though with dramatic flair, the author notes hell as Hades. And in the same way, Barbelo and the Virgin Spirit created entities and realms, so did Yaldabaoth. We're going to call him Yalda from now on, just for my sanity. Now buckle in for something truly wild. Yalda, or as the book calls him, the dim ruler, declares there is no God but me. He truly believes it. He's dim. He doesn't realise or can't comprehend the other beings that came before him. Yalda creates 365 demons, just in case he couldn't remember how many days of the year there were. Then he declares that he is a jealous god and there is no god but him. We have this contradiction. Yalda is both too dim to recognize the gods before him, but also kind of knows deep down that they exist. He just can't comprehend them. He's the villain who's too stupid to know he's the villain. So to summarize what on earth we've learned so far, we have a pre-god who thought himself into existence. His self-reflection, Barbelo, created 5 cosmic realms. Jesus was conceived and created 4 angels, one of whom, 11, contained Sophia. Sophia tried to create alone. It went wrong. Her son, Yalda, the dim ruler, stole her light, created his own realms, and declared himself the only god. And now, his mum is starting to realise what she's done. During this period, Sophia realises her light has gone. When she gazes upon her son again, she sees he has stolen it. She tries to repent. She cries, weeps, pleads. The realms created by Barbelo and the Virgin's spirit grant her clemency and raise her up again, above her son, but they do not restore Sophia to her former glory. She becomes a half-being. The Gnostic textual tradition wasn't some fringe movement. It was the primary rival to orthodox Christianity during the Roman Empire. To really emphasize how popular this was, in 140 AD, a Gnostic priest called Valentinus almost became pope. So the church had to respond, and they did so more potently over time. They retaliated first in the 2nd century, as all good rap battles of history do, with a book against heresies, which presented Gnostic texts as fake gems. They also pointed out the absurdity of a dim god ruling over the majesty of earth. The second retaliation came in the 3rd and 4th centuries. The lines between Gnostic and Orthodox apostles became so blurred the general populace couldn't tell the difference. How was a plebeian Roman, who could just about read, know if the text by the Apostle John was Orthodox or Gnostic? The church drew a hard line. Texts were divided ruthlessly. Gnostic ideas were immensely segregated. Then, in the latter 4th century, the hammer truly came down. They banned all Gnostic texts. This was followed by a decree that all Gnostic texts had to be burned, which is probably why these texts were found in Egypt, buried in the sand. Someone was trying to hide them from those trying to burn them. True masters of the hide-and-seek genre, if ever there was one. That concludes the first half of the secret book of John. A pre-god who thought himself awake, a cosmic pantheon of thought forms, a dim ruler who declared himself the only god while surrounded by beings he couldn't comprehend, and a church so threatened by these ideas that they spent centuries trying to burn them from history. If you've only ever read Genesis, almost everything you've heard tonight sounds completely upside down. That's kind of the fun in it. I hope I've offered a good balance of information and humour. And in the second half, we'll go even further down the rabbit hole. Yalda gets tricked into breathing life into the first human, and the higher beings put in place a daring plan to save humanity from the terror of a god who doesn't even know he's not alone. Thanks for watching. If this is your first time here, I re-examine ancient history to find what's been left behind. New long-form essays every weekend. Hit subscribe so you don't miss part 2.